everyone. I'm Kristin, and I'm on Instagram as Northwoods Feminist, and this is a chat that I have titled Bleeding in the Boundary Waters. And I'm so grateful for Hannah and Anna to join me. These are two women who I have spent a great deal of time with in the Boundary Waters, and I thought our collective knowledge will hopefully cover many of the things that folks are wondering. So we're going to do some introductions. We're going to talk about a little bit about our backgrounds and how we first learned about periods in the backcountry, and then also our canoe names, because we each somewhat recently have been able to purchase our own canoes. So I'll go first. So again, I'm Kristin. I am currently a resident of the Gunflint Trail. My academic background is as a feminist anthropologist, so that's kind of the lens through which I see a lot of the world, and I am excited to kind of bring it to my work helping kids experience the Boundary Waters. I work at a youth camp and retreat center. I first learned about periods in the backcountry actually when I was a camper as a kid, as an elementary school kid, out on the East Coast where I grew up, and the summer camp I went to had these overnight camping trips, and it was like part of the education that we got was to just explain, if you have your period, like this is what you're going to do. And pretty much I went there every year from like 5th grade to 12th grade, and every year I kind of got that talk. So I feel really grateful for that education. And my canoe's name is called the Nerf Herder, which if you know, you know. So
cool. So I'm Hannah. I met Kristin and Anna at the same camp off of the Gunflint Trail, where I've spent on and off seasons since 2016 about. My first real backcountry period memory was when I was learning to be a canoe guide on trail, and I had my period at over our staff trip, and one of my fellow staff members one day went back to the latrine and then came back very concerned that somebody was hurt and made a big announcement to everybody oh my gosh, I saw blood in the latrine, is someone hurt? And I remember just feeling so embarrassed, and it's I'm fine, it was just me just menstruating. I'm sure I said something weirder than that, but anyways, I'm kind of coming at it from that place and went on to work and love it there. But yeah, I am in seminary now and work as a birth doula and just care a lot about destigmatizing this type of thing and helping make the outdoors more accessible. So my canoe's name is Ruth Wader Finsberg, named this summer as a kind of homage to RBG. So she's been a good girl so far and has taken me on a few trips.
My name's Anna. I likewise met Kristin and Hannah working at camp. I was a canoe guide and also the director of health and safety. Currently, I work as a nurse in St. Paul. I guess the only thing I can think about with my connection to my first period experience in the Boundary Waters or in the backcountry at all was one time I was surprised by the need to change my Diva cup, and I was hiking alongside of an actual waterfall and clung to the side while I changed my Diva cup and had to use moss to clean myself. So things have gotten better. My canoe's name is Ramblin' Rose.
Nice. Well, I'm so excited for this conversation because kind of the reality that this knowledge gap exists in, what are you going to do except laugh or cry? So I guess we're going to laugh about it. Making this video has been a desire on my heart for years now. So I'm just so excited to be finally doing it for a couple of reasons. I'm someone that fields a lot of phone calls and emails, and every single spring without fail, there are multiple phone calls of people that are bringing groups up to the Boundary Waters, and they're like, hey, I have campers coming on this trip who have questions and I don't know what to tell them about periods. There's a lot of content out there about, periods in the backcountry more generally, but the Boundary Waters is a pretty specific wilderness area. There are some commonalities with other backcountry areas, but also a lot of differences. And I also, just experimentally Googled like boundary waters and menstruation. And the first hit is a forum that asks about like if bears are going to be attracted to period products, which is certainly a valid question, but it's just like kind of goes to show like, first of all, people are not taking this seriously. And also, like, if that's the first kind of like bit of information that shows up on Google, like we have a lot of filling in the gaps to do, I think. So, and I should also say, like, a lot of resources out there are not made with inclusive language. It's a lot of like women in backcountry camping or women backpacking or whatnot. And just to acknowledge that we're going to be talking about people who menstruate, because not all people that menstruate are women and not all women menstruate. And that's a really important distinction for people seeking out information, I think, to just kind of have that inclusive language. And the other kind of side of this is to appropriately care for the environment and to follow leave no trace principles as best as we can. Um, and as we know, this past summer, there were a lot of new users of the boundary waters, and there's kind of been a lot of news reporting and just like general chit chat about kind of the resource damage and the lack of education that happened with new users. And I'm really not into like shaming that kind of behavior, because it really just is an education gap. And I think that where we can come into play is just sharing some of our experiences and knowledge to hopefully help people know what to do. Yeah. And I guess the last thing I'll say about it is a lot of information talks about, you have to pack out your period products, which is true. And also, like, what does that mean? So we're going to talk about what that means. So I'm going to let Hannah kind of talk a little bit about the leave no trace principles and sort of how that relates to periods and hygiene and what we're talking about today.
Cool. Okay, so this is just like very, like, kind of like ground level info to go into a Boundary Waters trip knowing. And basically, this is about what we call the GL, the government latrine. So in the Boundary Waters, each designated campsite has both a fire grate and a government latrine, which we call GL for short. So usually when you find a campsite, there's going to be a trail heading away from the fire grate back into the woods, and there you're going to find a GL. This is basically just a pit toilet. Sometimes they have a lid, sometimes they don't. There's kind of like brown toilet seats that rise out of the ground. In general, it's good to prepare to both use a GL when you're at a campsite, which is great, and also to what we call wilder pee, when you need to pee or change your period products while you are between campsites. Basically, you just, find your space, drop your pants, pee in the woods. It's great. Both of these can be accomplished without too much trouble. So the quick and dirty of it, kind of, get it, is that nothing can go into the GL except for human waste and toilet paper, okay? So this means that pads, tampons, any wrappers or applicators, or wipes of any kind must be packed out, like Kristin said. This basically means that you have to carry them with you in a garbage bag and throw them out once you come off trail. If you're not near a GL, it's pretty similar, but basically there is no GL. So you just need to dig a hole at least 6 inches deep and 200 feet away from water or trails or campsites. So when you are finished, you'll just fill the hole back in and then cover it up with needles and leaves. You can do that with a stick. You could do that with a rock. You could do that with your hands, I guess. Or you could also use a handy dandy little trowel like I have here. So you could just carry a light little thing like this with you and then just whoop, whoop, real quick. So yeah, that's kind of the basic GL guideline and leave no trace principles. So I think next we can think about period products.
Yeah, I think so. We're going to be breaking down specific period products that you would be using at home, and kind of help people to understand, what might be best for you to use when you are on a canoe trip or elsewhere in the backcountry. So we're going to kind of go product by product, and I'm going to start off with tampons. So tampons do have different kinds of applicators and different kinds of packaging, but just based on what we have heard and learned from the Leave No Trace policy in the US Forest Service is that any part of the tampon needs to be packed out when you are finished. We've had some questions about biodegradable tampons, and when we've reached out to the Forest Service to ask about, like what if it's an organic cotton or it's biodegradable, to be quite frank, they said that we have to have everything packed out, but we aren't sure if they've even looked into the possibility of biodegradable tampons. So maybe just keep an eye on that if there's news to come on, maybe in the future biodegradable tampons are safe to go in the latrine. But for now, pack it out.
Similar in terms of like another disposable product, pads are obviously really common. And just like with tampons, the wrappers and used pads have to be packed out. So nothing can go into the GL. There are a lot of pros to using pads or bringing them in your med kit if you're planning a trip with friends, family, whoever, and you don't necessarily know like who's coming with you and what their needs might be. Because generally they're kind of like the most accessible product that basically anybody can use. Some people don't favor them because they can be bulky, they can, create more trash that you have to carry out, which I would argue isn't really a big deal because you're going to have trash either way. Also something to consider if you're going to have folks coming on a trip with you who could potentially have their first period, which Anna, what would you call an age range for that, for like a potential first period?
I would say like anybody 9 or older might as well bring it.
Yeah, awesome. We're going to talk about menstrual cups. So these are things like sometimes we commonly call them diva cups, but there's a lot of different brands on the market.
Yeah, so menstrual cups are great in some ways because they don't create any extra garbage, right? Like no wrappers or applicators or anything like that. But they do require that you clean them, maybe with moss, maybe, to consider how to clean them is the issue, really. I would personally use a cup back in my guide days, and I would always just empty it into the GL maybe once or twice a day and wipe it out with toilet paper and put it back in. But I would just wash it well when I got off trail, and I never had any problems. Anna, I know that you have had an experience with that as well.
Yeah, so I had to change my Diva Cup more regularly. So I kind of had, after the moss situation, I've kind of developed a system, so I'm happy to share. So basically, when I go to either the GL to empty my Diva Cup, or if I'm just in the woods, I would bring with me a water bottle full of potable water. So if it's clean to drink, it's clean to use to clean myself. So I would be able to rinse it out and dry it out with some toilet paper, either in a hole that I've dug or over the GL, and then able to reinsert that after that. But I will say that for fear of dropping it in the GL, I would recommend going next to the GL to change it, because just you don't want to lose it. That would be horrible. And I think we saw that on Instagram. Somebody mentioned that as well. So,
which brings up a really good point that if you have a method for managing a period that relies on one thing, like one menstrual cup, you probably want to bring a backup, because if something happens to your one item and you don't have a backup, that would be a big bummer.
It's true. It's a bold move.
So as far as cleaning when I got back, that was something that like is recommended that you would boil it once a cycle. So I would boil, sterilize it. I would like to just also share that we learned recently about a new method for cleaning your Diva Cup. So if you feel like you need a more rigorous cleaning regimen for your Diva Cup, if like rinsing it between changing it is not enough, you can use scent-free mild soap to clean it. And you can use what the Diva Cup brand has is like essentially a Tupperware. So what I have here for a prop is a Tupperware that I would use. I would fill it like halfway with water, put the Diva Cup in with a couple of drops of soap, and then you can shake it and then rinse it afterwards. And that is kind of like your little dishwasher for the Diva Cup. Another great question is like, what other disinfectants can you use to clean it? You don't have to use anything other than soap and water, or even just hot water, clean water. But if you're more comfortable, like disinfecting it when you get off trail with an alcohol wipe or something like that is absolutely appropriate. But between like going to the bathroom and changing your Diva Cup on your like regular 12-hour basis, just water is great.
It's also good to consider like how clean your hands are when you're on trail as you're removing and reinserting the cup. Like they're not the cleanest they've ever been on trail, but there are ways to make them cleaner. So with soap or hand sanitizer, just good to be aware of where your hands have been lately when you're on trail.
I would also recommend just a last note here that if you are interested in trying a Diva Cup for the backcountry purposes, be sure to practice at home first. It is kind of a complicated process at the beginning. So once you've had the motions down, then it'll be easier to bring on trail.
So we got a question about period underwear, which I think is a great question. And it wasn't something I had initially thought about using on trail, but I think could totally work.
Yeah, I personally really like period underwear. They're a somewhat newer option, like you said, and they can work really well with canoe camping. So I have a pair here just to kind of show. These are Thinks that I have. They're just like regular kind of black undies. They say go with the flow, which is kind of cute. But basically, there are lots of different options. But basically, they're just like undies that soak up menstruation. And I think that they are a great option for canoe camping, but you would want to at least bring two pairs with you. So you could have a pair that you're wearing and a pair that you can wash and dry so that you can alternate between the two. So basically, the pros are that you don't create additional garbage that you would have to pack out, which is great. The cons are that you would need to bring soap and always be thinking about washing and drying. And also remaining aware that people who you're with on trail could probably like see them drying or see you washing them. So it could be a matter of just privacy and trusting folks that you're with on trail. One popular way to wash clothing while camping is to use like a bigger plastic bag with water and soap and to kind of agitate it to make it sudsy and wash it out. So then you'll rinse it, and remember that all soapy water should be dispersed about 200 feet away from water sources.
The last thing we're going to talk about, similar to that, would be reusable pads, which kind of have a similar pro and con, I guess you could call it, to the period underwear. So here's like an example of what that looks like. And you kind of have two ways you could think about it. You know, you could bring enough for your entire period and then just, you know, keep the used ones in a garbage bag, in a baggie, and then wash them when you get home. Or you could kind of wash them as you go, just like with the period undies, and use soap. So just in terms of, you know, all the different period products that we laid out, none are better or worse than others. It all just comes down to personal preference, comfort. You know, if you want to try something new, like Anna said, maybe test it out at home first just to make sure you're comfortable with it. But I'm not really a fan of pressuring people into one thing or another. Like, I feel like there's a lot of kind of feeling out there that you really need to go with a no waste or a low waste option. And not everybody is necessarily comfortable with those options, and that's okay. You can absolutely go to the Boundary Waters, have a period, and use any of these products, and it's fine. And I think that it's important to keep that kind of like expansive. And when we obsess about being like lightweight and like not having that much trash, like that can be harmful for people where like this might be a concern. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about having a period go bag, or kind of where do you keep these products. For example, I always have a small fanny pack with me when I'm on my canoe trips, and I have all kinds of stuff in there lighter, multi-tool, a small hand sanitizer, whatever. So in that case, I would keep whatever I'm using. So like keep my tampons in there, keep a trash bag, have my hand sanitizer, have some toilet paper, so that it's always accessible.
I sometimes bring a little bit of a rag that I can use as like a workstation to clean my products when I'm squatting in the woods. And so just something to have on hand, whether that be in your fanny pack, the top of a pack, easily accessible. It's nice to have.
If you've been in a canoe trip, you know that you're probably packing in big Duluth packs. And if there's something that you need at the bottom of the pack, it's so annoying to get out. It's impossible. It makes everybody irritated, which if you need to do that, that's fine. Irritate them. But it's also nice to have it ready to go, easily accessible if you can plan ahead. It'll just make your life easier. If you just need to like dip into the woods or dip to the GL, that's fine. You don't need to necessarily spend a lot of money to, have everything you need for a canoe trip. But the three of us all really love Kula cloths, which look like this.
Ooh.
And this is a product that basically it has like a colorful side and then a black side. And this side, the whole thing is quick dry. And this side is antimicrobial. And it's basically a pee rag. So sometimes people will use bandanas. That's another common thing to use as a pee rag. But basically it's an alternative to toilet paper. And you can use it when you have to pee and just let it air dry. So like I'll just hang this off my backpack or even like on the thwart of my canoe and let it dry between uses. And then if I'm on like a longer multi-day trip, it's something you can easily wash in your campsite. But in general, if there's a possibility that somebody might have their period on your trip, you're going to want to bring additional toilet paper. And then also thinking about medication. If there's a possibility that someone on your trip might need additional medication like ibuprofen or Tylenol, you're going to want to pack that on top of the things for your normal, like unexpected injuries, illnesses, etc.
So thinking about packing out period garbage, right? Thinking about disposable products in particular, like tampons, pads, etc. We think it works well to have a baggie that you use just for your period waste rather than putting it in the group's general trash bag, right? Because you can just keep it with you throughout the day rather than having to carry all the trash around or getting stuck kind of like digging, looking for the trash bag while you're still traveling, say, in between campsites. You want something that's pretty small and accessible and private if you want, so you can keep it with you. Some ideas for how to make this, nicer is just to put a duct tape over the baggie, like Kristin is doing. You can use a solid color baggie, like green ones, camp green ones.
I didn't cover the whole thing, but you could cover it like front and back. And then this would just be like your baggie. And if there's multiple people on the trip, you can write your name on it so you don't get mixed up. And that's probably the simplest way to do it.
If you're worried about odor, which you do not need to be, but your feelings are valid, you can put some crushed aspirin or like loose tea bags in the baggie. And then just kind of something else to think about that's related is that many disposable products are scented, and the scent of the product could attract animals or critters, like the artificial scent in the product, not your menstruation blood.
So like Hannah was saying, anything scented that you bring, any kind of personal care products, your toothpaste, deodorant, whatever, all your food is going to need to be in some kind of bear resistant container or hung in the specific way that the Forest Service requires to prevent bears from getting at it. It is a myth that period blood attracts bears. And I actually was able to do a little bit of research on it. And this myth can be dated to a specific incident. In 1967, there were two different women that were attacked by grizzly bears and killed on the same night. It was later concluded that there was no connection between menstruating on these bear attacks. Weird. And it's also worth noting that in the boundary waters, we only have black bears. And there was actually a specific study done on black bears. And the study looked at if they were interested in both used period products and also people who are menstruating at that time. It was found that neither of those things interested the black bears. People, I think, like to talk about this because it's funny. To them, it's really kind of just misogynistic and a barrier to people feeling comfortable in the boundary waters. But I do think it's important to address because it is, for whatever reason, a really common concern. And that concern is valid. This is a whole larger conversation, but generally when bears are coming after food or whatever it is at campsites, it's much more of a nuisance problem than like a run for your life kind of problem. So it's not like, a bear is probably going to attack you either way. So the bottom line is put your used period products in the bear bag as kind of an overall precaution, but they're not specifically attracted to period blood.
And just kind of as a last note, thinking about packing out period waste, we just really want to emphasize that if you are worried about this being gross, just know that many folks who menstruate do this exact thing while traveling in the boundary waters, the three of us included. And it might seem strange if you aren't super used to it, but please rest assured that you are in good company. So when we talk about packing out products and covering it with duct tape, it's not because it is a bad or gross thing. We just want to support you and give you options and help figure out how best to do this, because we're in this together and lots of people go through it.
So another little note on preparing for your trip when you're going to the boundary waters, just so you guys know, and you may have already experienced this, that bodies can act differently when you're on trail, when you're in the boundary waters, when you're backpacking, whatever, with your different changing sleep schedule, exercising, eating routine, even that can make your period either lighter or heavier. So be prepared. If you are planning a canoe trip and you have someone who is coming on your trip who even has the potential of going to be menstruating, plan on bringing materials for them. And when you're planning for a canoe trip, you are going to have meetings most likely beforehand to talk about your route and your food. Talk about periods then too, and talk about, do you feel comfortable bringing your own things? I'm going to bring stuff anyways. So just like you're not going to go out on a canoe trip without teaching somebody about how to do a J-stroke or how to navigate or how to start a fire, this isn't any different. So don't assume that everybody knows this information. So normalize bodies, normalize bleeding in the boundary waters. Yeah.
I think being really like not using euphemisms, just being really like forthright about products, what they're called, like saying menstruating, saying period, like that's really important. And it kind of helps to break down that culture of shame, which is really pervasive just in our kind of cultural context. And this is a place where that shows up. And that really sucks because that's not something you want to feel in the boundary waters.
The wilderness is a place where you should be able to be your full self and feel comfortable doing that. And I hope that you can be on trail with people who help empower you to be that. But if you are not, it's good to be prepared for that too. And we just want to make everything available to you that we can when it comes to this topic. So, yeah.
And like we said at the beginning, we're not going to cover everything. So hopefully, this is like the start of a conversation. And, if there's more questions that either we don't know the answers to or that come up, in the future, at least I'm like excited to hear them and answer them and help provide resources when possible. One other question that we got that we didn't really talk about was sort of like general cleanliness, like how do you stay clean and fresh when you're in the boundary waters, which is sort of a larger topic of like how do you navigate, when you don't have your daily shower or whatever routines you have at home. In terms of managing a period while on trail, I think something like baby wipes or period specific wipes are a great option. A lot of people bring them on trail for a variety of reasons, even just to like wash their hands or to kind of like wipe off. But that might be something that even if you don't normally use it at home, it might be something you'd be interested in using while on trail, just to help feel like a little more clean and fresh. Also making sure that you have enough like underlayers, like whatever base layer underwear you use, like making sure that you have enough clean and dry stuff to be changing into every day is really important. We can mitigate the risk of things like UTIs or yeast infections that might sideline a trip. So yeah, in addition to what we've been talking about, we're just going to run through some other bathroom related tips. So one concern that people sometimes have is there's no walls or door to a latrine. So how do you make sure that somebody doesn't walk up on you? I won't lie, that's a fear I have. I wouldn't really like that. So I really like using a method that you could call the bright orange toilet bag trick. So we always have our toilet paper and hand sanitizer in a brightly colored bag. It happens to be orange in our case. That's different than everything else that we pack. So we know that that's what it is. And we put it at the very start of the trail that goes back to the latrine. So if you're going to go to the latrine, you take the orange bag with you, you have toilet paper and hand sanitizer, you use it, you put everything back. And then when you're finished, you put it back in that same spot at the beginning of the trail to the latrine. So if you are looking for the bag and it's not there, it's like, oh, bathroom door is locked, can't go right now. So it's just kind of that visual signal that it's occupied, it's not there, it's not available to me. So I'll just need to wait a minute. That has worked really well. I've also been in places where, the burn damage is so significant that there's like not enough foliage to block the GL. And there's more than one or two campsites where that's the case for sure. So I have, depending on who I'm with, in a case where it was like, I don't really know these people that well, we've put up a tarp just like to kind of block the view. And that was fine. And that worked for our group. There's also times where you're comfortable enough that you can just be like, hey, I'm going back here, whatever. What if you have to pee and you're not near a latrine? So we kind of covered this. You have to be 200 feet away from trails, campsites, water sources.
And also just to know that it's okay and it's kind of enjoyable sometimes. It's one of the few times that I often find to myself when I'm on trail and truly enjoy the moment to just step away from the group if need be and just take a nice little wilder pee. I'll also say, if you can find a place that has a view, go for the vista pee, right? And just enjoy yourself, take your time, take in the view. You can also use suitable vegetation if you want to. So know your plants if you are planning to do this. We like large-leafed asters, also known as the lumberjack's TP. Those are always pretty much around in the summer in most places.
Another important thing to note is that squatting down is not comfortable or possible or easy for everybody. You could do an assist if you have a friend who can help you kind of like support you squatting down. Also using what's around you, like a tree stump, a big rock, whatever, something that you can help support your body weight, lean on. We shouldn't assume that everyone can just like squat. Knees are challenging, Yeah.
Once I tried to pee with a canoe on my shoulders to prove something to myself, and I accidentally peed in my pants because I could not think about what way that it would come out. And so I just changed midstream to fix it, but it was too late.
The very last thing I want to touch on, because we got a question about this, is how things change in the winter. And what I'm going to say is I need to put a little bit of a pin in this because I found some conflicting information depending on who I was talking to or what sources I was looking at. In the description, there is a link to the U.S. Forest Service Boundary Waters Trip Planning Guide. And it says that you are not supposed to camp on designated campsites when the lakes are frozen. I have also heard from the Forest Service that it is okay to use the latrine. So there's a little bit of conflicting info out there that I want to follow up on. So I'm, like I said, linking some resources in the description of the video, including the fascinating bear menstruation research that I found, which I just love that somebody made these studies and did them. That's just so great. So for your researching pleasure. And again, you know, other questions that maybe we didn't talk about or other tips or ideas that you have, please share them. Let me know. You know, I'd love to follow up. Anything you think we got wrong, let us know. And we can follow up and make any corrections. And then a big thanks to Hannah and Anna for joining me in my lifelong dream of having this conversation on YouTube. And shout out to Kate for helping us put this video together and edit it and make us look better than we would without her help. So thanks everyone.